Ready? I'll call this meeting to order. The Bennington Select Board, Monday, July 8th, 2013, 6 p.m. Tom Jacobs, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you, Tom. On our agenda, the next order is minutes. However, Sharon, will you have a statement you'd like to make, please?
Yes, I would just like to send the condolences of the board to the Colvin, Jerome, and Graves family on the loss of Hope Graves over the weekend.
So our deepest sympathies to Lodi, Jim, everyone else involved. Jamie. Okay, next item on the agenda, the minutes for June 24th, 2013.
Move that they be accepted as written.
Okay, I have a motion to be accepted as written. I have a second. Any discussion on the minutes for Monday, June 24th?
Well done.
If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that's 6 and 1 absent. None opposed. Okay. Next item on the agenda, the warrants. And we'll start with you, Justin.
No, Joe, I don't have any questions.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, on the dated 7/3.
Which page?
On page 2, item 304416, Paul Doucette. Stu, was it a purchase of a cell phone? Just curious, why don't we lease one?
In this particular case, this was a cell phone that was in the evidence locker and was mistakenly disposed of.
I see.
And we had to purchase a new one to return it to the original owner.
Okay. Is that it? Tom?
No questions.
Greg? Sharon?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Okay, next item on the agenda are citizens. Mary Garris, you want to come to the mic, please? Introduce yourself and tell the folks why you are here to this evening, please.
Sure, I would love to. My name is Mary Garrish, and I'm here this evening both as a member of the Bennington Interfaith Council and as a board member of the Bennington Coalition for the Homeless. And I'm here because I want to make an appeal for other folks who can't feel empowered to state their plight to you, our representatives. And I want to do it on their behalf and on behalf of some of the faith communities that are coming together to try and solve a really bad situation that's about to occur all over Vermont, but in Bennington particularly, from my point of view. And what's happening is, as you may or may not know, I'll just give a little background, the state has been, for a number of years, putting up people who find themselves in an emergency where they don't have any housing, and they have to meet certain criteria, either disability, children of a young age. There are various criteria. And when there's not housing available through the services of 211, and it used to be through Brock as well, those folks can get a motel voucher. And there are several motels in town that have been under contract with the state for $30-some a night. And there's a maximum stay of about 83 days, which is because during that period, the assumption is that all of our community agencies, whether it's Brock, Coalition for the Homeless, UCS, DOC, everybody in town is going to work together through some case management and try and increase the self-sufficiency of these folks so that by the time that their time in the motel is up, they'll be in a different place than they were when they went in. So this year, what happened was that the budget was cut by 75%. And the original date when new rules had to take effect was July 1st. And a bunch of the community agencies found out about it in a meeting the week before and said, what in heaven's name is going to happen to all of these folks? So the governor actually extended the time from the 1st to the 15th. So what had happened is now Brock doesn't administer those vouchers anymore. Only the General Assistance Office administers them. So everybody on July 1st that had a motel voucher had to go make an appointment with General Assistance. And obviously, not everyone could be seen that day, partially because General Assistance, not knowing this was going to happen either, had a lot of folks on vacation. It was July 4th week, and people take that time off. So the governor and Doug Racine extended it until July 15th, saying, oh, that'll give General Assistance a time to review everybody. And what they came up with is a point scale, and someone has to have 6 points now in order to get a motel voucher. And traditionally, motel vouchers were reserved for the most vulnerable of our population here in Bennington. And so lots of folks are disabled. They might be disabled vets. They're maybe on SSDI. Social Services came up with a 6-point scale and decided here's what they're going to assign for points to people. If you're a disabled vet, you get 1 point. If you have children under the age of 6, you get 2 points. Yep. If it's more than a certain number, you might get 3. At any rate, if you're over 65, you get 1 point. So as you can see, and if you're otherwise disabled, you get 1 point. As you can see, and as they readily admit, it's very difficult to get to the 6 points, which is the goal of that system, because they're cutting back by 75%. The end result of that for people all over the state, but for us here in Bennington, is that on July 15th, there are going to be lots of these most vulnerable folks in our community who are literally going to be on the street homeless because their motel voucher expired. Bennington Coalition for the Homeless has never had the capacity to serve numbers of families like in that amount. And Sadie Fischer, who is the regional field representative for AHS, sent an email last Friday saying there were about 35 families at that count.
Here in Bennington.
Here in Bennington, only. And as the week progresses and General Assistance sees more people, we'll know more about that number. We'll also, obviously, the Coalition for the Homeless and Brock and General Assistance and every other organization in town is scrambling, trying to get something together.
Let me ask, Mary, because I want to make sure, General Assistance also services Shasberry, Pownell, Woodford. Are we saying this 35 is strictly Bennington residents, or it's the area that the Assistance Office?
Well, I know it's Bennington County. Okay. I don't know for, I will find out and let everybody know. We were told Bennington, and I assumed it was the town of Bennington because our meeting is for agencies in the town of Bennington, but you're right. Theoretically, it could be the outlying towns as well. So I will find that out and let everybody know. That's a very good question. Thank you, Joe. And so as a result, we said, gee, maybe we should contact the Interfaith Council, because in the past, when there was an issue of people not having housing in very cold weather, the Interfaith Council had talked about the possibility of having rotating shelters in their parish hall. The town that I used to live in Connecticut did that, and it worked very well, where it's at one place for a few nights, then at another place, then at another, and it's strictly overnight. It's not living there. It's just, you know, like 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. So we started talking to some of the faith communities in town, and the ones who were the most able to help in terms of perhaps letting people use their parish halls so far have been Second Congregational Church and St. Peter's Church. I happen to be a member of St. Peter's. We have representatives from Second Congregational here as well. And the idea was that certainly this is a short-term solution, and nobody has agreed on all the parameters yet, although we did come up with rules and that sort of thing. So the idea was to let folks come into the parish hall and sleep there for the night, and then leave during the day to go to their appointments, whether it's an appointment for job interviews, for education, for getting other benefits, for meeting with landlords in the neighborhood, whether it's to go to the VA to talk to Lee about getting their benefits. At any rate, they'd be right here in town so that they could easily walk to all these appointments. So one of St. Peter's vestry members called Mr. Goodhue and was told that we couldn't have any more than 6 people in there, even just for overnight, without a hardwired sprinkler system. So that began to pose another problem. So then we talked to Joshua, or I talked to Joshua at Morningside Shelter in Brattleboro. And although the town of Brattleboro is being pretty flexible about those kinds of regulations, they also have more people there. So they were also collecting tents. So we started collecting tents and sleeping bags because we don't know how many families. And is a tent a great home for a family? Of course not. Is it better than having nothing over your head in the rain? Yes. And is it temporary? Yes. So then at St. Peter's, we also discussed, and the vestry discussed, putting some tents up. Because if we could only have 6 people inside, we could put some tents up. And at least in the interim, while they were trying to find somewhere else to go, they would have a roof over their head. Because the prospect of having 35 families literally on the sidewalk, it just wasn't acceptable to people of faith. Just not at all. And it's become difficult because there are all these regulations. Now, I did find out that there's not a zoning problem because one of the sections of the zoning ordinance, I think it's Article 6.2, specifically says that zoning ordinances don't apply to, and then it says temporary shelters, and the definition of a temporary shelter is a tent, camper, or other mobile device designed to be transported, not affixed to the ground, and not in place for 30 days or more. So that could very well be. I also spoke with several people at the state over the past few days. Paul Dragon, who's the head of Human Services, and Daniel Blankenship with HUD. And I don't know if they got a hold of Mr. Goodhue or not. They were going to call and say they were hoping there was some flexibility because they don't want to see all these people out either, but they can't do anything about it between now and July 15th. So why am I here tonight? I'm here tonight because you are our elected representatives for the people of the town of Bennington. We trust you. We know you are going to take good care of us, and that's why we elect you. We couldn't think of anywhere to go but here to say, please, we need help with this problem that has been invisible because everybody's been in motels, which is now going to be very visible because everybody's going to be on the sidewalk. And what can you do to help? I should mention that we contacted the Armory. The Armory is not allowed to have, when troops are deployed, it has to be left for the reserve. I get that totally. That's a military thing. And apparently this firehouse also isn't able to be used. It's my understanding that the schools, it would entail a lot of expense because they have to have custodians and police officers. I know even when we had the Empty Bowls fundraiser there, we had to provide all of that, and that was only for an evening, and it was very expensive. So the UN recently sent a rapporteur, who's somebody that collects information and stories, over to this country to investigate housing because there's such a problem of homelessness. And what she suggested and what the High Commissioner has suggested to the White House is that localities be instructed that they need to find public places where people can put up shelter when there's no other housing available. I think that you, as our representatives, you know what our needs are. I'm here to further tell you what our needs are for the people that aren't empowered to be here by themselves. And it's not just me, it's lots of other folks here in the audience, lots of faith communities, and lots of folks who are the most vulnerable in our town. So we would love for you to perhaps be able to find some flexibility in some of the codes, or just to be aware that people are going to have to be sleeping in these tents. We intend to provide every safety measure we can. The coalition will have case managers on site so that everybody that comes in there, we will make sure that they're there because they lost their motel voucher, and be referring them out to all our other partner agencies in town of how to help them. So I'm asking you if you have any other ideas of larger public areas, and if not, I'm asking you to support the faith communities that know that they need to help their neighbors.
Mary, let me ask, first of all, and Stuart, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have one approved emergency shelter here in Bennington, and that's the middle school. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that can only be opened under emergency conditions declared by Red Cross. That can only, the middle school is the only approved emergency shelter here in Bennington. And we have exercised that, and we have tested that in the past, and it works. However, we've done it in natural emergencies to where the Red Cross has given us
correct
permission to open it. However, there is a cost associated.
Right.
I haven't read anything in the newspaper about this.
No,
I haven't asked any plea for funds to help maybe offset what it would cost to open the shelter that we have here with the school. Have you coordinated with the supervisory union school board?
No, because of
Cost?
pardon me, no, because of the fact that I was informed that Red Cross and the Red Cross shelter can only be utilized during times of natural disaster when FEMA kicks in. That wasn't
used or funded for?
Pardon me?
To be used or be funded for? I mean,
Be funded for.
it belongs to the people of Bennington, or to the.
Well,
to the union.
That's correct.
right. It would be funded for it because it is an expensive venture. And we didn't talk about it because none of us, including the faith communities who are called to help our neighbors, have the resources to do that. And, you know, we don't have money to offer, but we have some space maybe that we could offer. And we feel like we have to offer something. And we know that when we were a community experiencing a natural disaster, it was really miraculous how we all came together to help our own community. And a lot of you were at the forefront of that. This is a disaster too. It's not a natural disaster. It's a man-made disaster, but it's still a disaster, and people still need the help.
Board members want to weigh in on this, Tom?
You know, it's a bureaucratic disaster. And
Correct.
unfortunately, we're hearing about it for the first time.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is that we have a responsibility to provide a safety net to those people that are citizens or otherwise of our community. And our charge can and should be to provide safe and, if not comfortable, situation for them. I think tents are not a very good approach to dealing with this type of situation. It calls for more of a permanent structure, and I think the junior high should be contacted, or the school, to find out if we can work together, even if it costs us some temporary assistance in the form of dollars. I think we should find it, because we have to be a safety net for these folks.
Thank you.
Other members?
How many people are we talking about?
That's the other unfortunate part is, believe it or not, the state wasn't able to say exactly how many people. What we do know is that as of Friday, there were about 35 families. We don't know what that means. That could be a
Is
one
that Bennington County? Sorry to interrupt. Is that Bennington County or just Bennington?
Well, that's what I'm not sure. That's what Sadie gave us, and I don't know, but I'll find out for sure whether it's just the town or whether it includes the rest of the county, and I can let you know that.
Because my point here is that if it also includes Pownell, Shaftesbury, Woodford, these towns should also step up.
I agree. I totally agree. I'm coming to you because you're my representatives, and I know that you would want to help. And as far as not hearing about it, I'm appalled as well. We get press releases from the governor's office all the time, but we sure didn't get one about this. And even social services is just putting out information today to some of the other places in the state about it.
Stuart, let me ask you, if a plea went out to the community, for those of us who have travel trailers, be willing to donate them for a short time for this purpose, where would we have a facility that these could be parked to where water, electricity, sewer would be available any place?
Not that I know of in Bennington.
Are there
I mean,
any
you know,
camping
you're looking for campsites essentially
Yeah, basically.
that are geared for that and planned for that. And I don't believe there are any in Bennington any longer. I think there were at one time, but not any longer.
But Stu, do we still have all those cots? We have
Yeah.
everything that the National Guard gave us, correct?
We have cots. The middle school has cots. But it's a question of if the middle school will open its doors, I think Tom is right, how do you fund it? Because the Red Cross won't. The Red Cross will only respond in a natural disaster because they do, in fact, get reimbursed by the federal government when they do that. So it's going to be a matter of working with the school board, Mount Anthony Union High School Board, to see if they, in fact, would open their building. We don't know whether or not there are programs ongoing during the summer that might have conflicts. That's one of the issues we have here. This building is scheduled pretty tight with training and other agency uses throughout the summertime. We don't have carbon monoxide detection in here. We don't have some of the things you would need to house people overnight. That's the problem for a lot of the churches. Sprinklers, no carbon monoxide detection. So it's a very difficult situation, and I don't think it's one that, unfortunately, we can solve on the fly. And so I think it's going to, as Tom has said, it's going to take a combined effort to, one, if in fact tents are the only option or travel trailers are an option, where do you put them? How do you get them sufficient infrastructure so that they are safe and sanitary? I don't have answers for those.
Let me ask you, if, let's say the school, we could make arrangements there, the town be willing to provide the security, divert police officers to make sure in kind, our service in kind to that project?
To the extent that we could afford to, from a personnel perspective, not
Right.
money-wise,
Personnel
I would
side.
say yes.
Okay.
And that really depends on what kind
A
of,
question to the school would be, would they be willing to donate the facility for a short period?
What's the time frame, Mary? Do you think?
Well, it's,
I mean, the
and I'm
tough
sorry to
thing
be
is-
so vague, but I'm not going to lie to anybody. I mean, I really don't know, but I would hope, what I said to our church community was that we would think it would be about 30 to 60 days, because what Doug Racine said was that during the very cold weather, another exemption will kick in where more vouchers will be. Now, I can't guarantee, I
Yeah,
don't,
the tough thing is the middle school piece it's really out of our hands.
I understand. And as far as the tents go, I know that at Thatcher House, the coalition's, one of the coalition properties, we figured that we could probably put about 13 tents on the lawn there. I'm not sure, I know that there's property at other faith communities, St. Peter's might be one of them, where tents could go. I'm not, it's not that I want tents, it's just that I want something. There were tents could go and people could use the indoor facilities, so at least you've got the plumbing part, and the same with Thatcher House. We have showers at Thatcher House and at the North Street Emergency Shelter, several of them that people could also use, even though I don't think the faith communities have showers. And so that would be like a temporary measure until we can figure out.
Kevin, would you mind coming up just for a minute? I just have a couple questions.
Kevin?
Mr. Goodhue.
Well,
They're not hard questions, I promise.
I've got a question for you, just a suggestion or another alternative before you want to do Kevin first?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
that's fine.
I know that you have state regulations that you have to follow. Is
That's
there any flexibility with
No.
any of this, or can there only be a certain number of people? Like she said, there can only be like 6 people in a...
Well, that's incorrect at St. Peter's. I called the lady today, and it now becomes a zoning issue as well. So they cannot have I believe, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, that at St. Peter's, and I called the lady today and told them that.
Can't have anything?
What's,
Or
That's
the
correct.
tents? Or which?
The tents or the 6
Individuals?
people inside. That's correct.
Are there any numbers that can be
How do you
allowed?
determine how many people can be in a space? Like, say they use, I don't know, Missionary Alliance up on,
Well, it's, if we have it at certain places in town, Benmont Avenue and some places on North Street, you can have 6 people.
okay.
But where some of these churches are, you can't have even 6 people because of a zoning issue.
Because of where they are?
Yes.
They're downtown?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that was my question to you with respect to all the churches in town here. I mean, St. Francis has all the facilities to do it, and I wonder if are there any limits and are there any numbers of
They've been
people that can?
asked. They
yes,
can't do it.
yes, they have. I have a question, though, for Mr. Goodhue, because, and I have it on my computer, if you'd like to look at it, which is the part of the zoning code, which, as I said, is in Article 2, which specifically exempts tents from any regulation by the zoning code.
Well, if it's a zoning question, you need to talk to Mr. Monks because he's a zoning administrator.
Dan?
Well, anyway, that's-
Mr. Chairman, I think this came on us very fast. I don't think we should call this a planning session
Right.
because there's so many moving parts.
Right.
Maybe if we can charge our administration and the school, because I don't think we should go around violating our zoning codes or violating our building codes. But maybe we could form a subcommittee or some sort to help
Right.
with this.
Mary, I think Tom brings up a good point, but let me ask a few things.
Well,
on this.
before, I
First of
just
all-
want
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
set the record straight. That last Wednesday, when I talked to someone at St. Peter's, I offered, and as well with Stacy today, I offered to meet with them, try to work out some of these solutions. And so, I mean, we're not heartless to this cause.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that, I'm sorry.
Yes, well, yeah, just so you all know that.
You're on the subcommittee.
Well, and that's fine, but I mean, I just want people to know that we did make the offer to go out and help and do
Right.
that as well, so.
Mary, a lot of people were watching this on TV, and you mentioned earlier in your brief how when we had Irene and other emergencies, the town and community comes together. I would suspect there's citizens out there who do have travel trailers hooked up at their home that could house somebody. So if those people are listening and they want to say, okay, Mary, for a short time, until we find a solution, who do they contact? You or Stacy or who?
That they could contact me, or, and I'm Mary Garish, Gerisch, either through a Facebook message, or they could call me. My phone number is 802-379-6311. They could call Thatcher House at Bennington Coalition for the Homeless, and that number is?
802-753-7205.
And that would be great. We've also asked people for any sleeping bags or tents, assuming that
Right.
tents are,
Well, I mentioned travel trailers. It could be.
yeah,
empty-
oh, yeah, that'd be
Could be
much
an empty
better.
apartment, it could be, something that could
Absolutely.
help people out, because the community is a very caring community. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I think that's why that microphone is there,
Okay.
is to hear things like this.
Thank you.
What about starting our own voucher program? And if these hotels are willing to take people at $30 a night and safe housing that are up to code and zoning and all that, before we start trying to reinvent the wheel here, maybe a short term is to try and find funding to keep that program going. If the state comes around and then it's still intact. But to me, it seems like that's safe and it's working and it's appropriate, as opposed to starting to pitch tents and fill gymnasiums with sleeping bags and things like that. I mean, certainly, there's a reason we have fire codes.
Oh, sure.
And if a gymnasium full of homeless people goes up in flames, the first thing they're going to say is, why weren't there any sprinkler systems? Why'd you let
Correct.
them sleep there? And it's a valid question. So perhaps, with the Interfaith Council and the good citizens of Bennington, we can come up with some kind of a funding situation here where we can just keep that program going on our own until everybody figures out what's going on.
That would be fine, too. I'm open for any suggestions, obviously.
If those hotel owners are willing to, extend that same discount to the program, it might keep things in place as opposed to the chaos that will come up, because I'm not particularly comfortable with everybody being thrown out on the street either, you know.
Right. I knew you wouldn't be, and that's why I felt that we needed to bring it to your attention.
It would run about $1,100 a day
A day?
for 35 families, $30 or more a night. And
I'd like
I'm
to
using your numbers.
offer a compromise solution. I mean, that would be an incredible expense that we wouldn't know how long it would go on. Could we offer, in lieu of money, a reduction in the property taxes for these motels?
No.
We don't control,
we don't
the money
control
goes to
that.
school, voters approve those things for a purpose.
But we might be able to negotiate a different rate.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have to, I don't think that we should expect that the town government is going to take over for the state government. I think if the community is going to come together on this, then fundraising in the community is appropriate. Looking to town government to pick up the expense, I think is inappropriate, and we certainly, we don't have the money.
It's not an option. The budget started the other day, and it's not a line item, so.
Right, and I don't have any problem with fundraising, except we're talking about July 15th.
Right.
And I don't know who could put together a fundraiser to, and how much people have to contribute. I think that's why the idea about contributing a trailer or a tent or something is, that a lot of people can do, you know.
I think Stacy can put it together very quickly.
I've seen her do
She's
this.
a fundraiser.
I'm doing that for the coalition. We still haven't met our budget numbers.
I understand, I'm just kidding.
The missing party here
I
is
think
the
we got the
state.
message out. Hopefully our
Okay,
banner
thank you.
reporter is going to take
Okay, thank you.
notes. Mary, but I just got to end with this. Here's where I'm disappointed, one, about finding out about today, but the budget process started in January in the legislature. Why weren't these agencies who are going to receive a 75% cut in their budget for something like this, why aren't they yelling and screaming?
That's what I don't
I know they
understand.
were during the 8 years I was in the legislature, if you cut
I know.
10%.
And I don't understand it either, Joe, and in fact, it appears to me, based on what our regional representative told us, that at least at the regional level, they just found out about it too. So I don't understand it either. It's terrible, I agree.
Okay, well, we're asking the
Thank
community to pull together. You have some numbers and points of contacts. If you have something can assist families, whether it's a trailer, an empty apartment maybe for a short term, or offer any other suggestions that would help us out of this, either Stacy New or Mary Garish, or you can call us at the town and point you in the right direction, and we'll move on with that. So, Mary, thanks for informing us on this thing. Okay. The next item is the Morgan Street wetlands. Shelley, are you going to talk about that, or no? Is that yours, Bruce?
He skipped
All
over the
right,
public
so
hearing.
whoever's going to talk about that.
Joe,
You skipped over.
you skipped over the public hearing for the
Oh, that's
floodplain.
right, too. Yeah, we got in there. I'm sorry, Bruce, you have to wait a minute. I got so wrapped up in this other thing here.
We didn't open it to any other citizens.
We have to have a public hearing to approve
Yeah.
or to listen to information on the amendment to the floodplain zoning regulation. So I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor? That's 6-4, none opposed, one absent. Okay, public hearing. Is there anyone out there want to talk about what we addressed at our last meeting, the amendment to the floodplain zoning regulation? Dan, you want to give a quick summary?
Sure, I'll do a quick summary. We have in place existing floodplain regulations that limit development within the FEMA floodplain, the 100-year, so-called 100-year floodplain. These are simply updates that are required by FEMA. There are no real substantive changes. In fact, the biggest change is the addition of a definitions table that we have to have in the document as opposed to referenced. Essentially, these regulations are required so that folks in town are eligible to purchase floodplain insurance. So these are the minimum requirements, the minimum regulations required. They have been reviewed by FEMA and by the state and approved, so that if we do adopt these, we will remain eligible for the flood insurance program. So there's really not a lot of change at all, except for some additional definitions and just following the format the new format that the FEMA folks would like us to follow.
Okay, the hearing's been warned, information's been out there. Have you received any phone calls from anyone out in the public on this change?
No, and we didn't have anybody at our planning commission hearing.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that want to speak to this at all? If not, then I'll,
Justin.
Just a question.
Go ahead, Justin.
So we need to adopt these, but we don't really have any options to change anything anyhow. I mean, even if we seen something,
Unfortunately.
even if we seen something in here that, you know, we thought was a little bit amiss, I mean,
This is
this is
basically
dictated
federal-
down to us, correct?
This is basically federal language that's required. for
Right,
most
and not that I've seen anything that, you know, looked out of place, but we just, our hands are pretty much tied with what they give us. Is that accurate?
Unfortunately, if we do want to remain in the program, which is really essential for a lot of folks, yes, this is
And
pretty
explain
much-
that to me one more time. It allows people to purchase.
Sure. As you may or may not know, all folks that have a mortgage on their property must have flood insurance. And the only folks that offer that at even a reasonable price is the National Flood Insurance Program that's administered through the federal government. We have certain requirements at the state and the town level that we must meet in order to remain in that program. Unfortunately, if you don't remain in that program, that flood insurance is not available to folks, and it would really, really makes it almost impossible to transfer property in a flood zone.
And the municipality has to keep that up.
It's available through a private insurer at that point. You can't
Right.
go through the national program.
Right.
You think we'd have a housing problem before?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
it's
I've just,
really cost
I just wanted to make sure I completely understood what we were doing, that's all.
No, absolutely. And again, these regulations are essentially already in place. They're not really, there's no real substantive changes to what's already in place.
Okay. Any other board
That was
members?
my other question.
Okay, I need a motion to end the public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that's 6-4, 1 day. Okay, now I need a motion to accept the amendment.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? That's 6-4, 1 absent. I went kind of fast as citizens. Is there any other citizens out there that want to address something we haven't had on agenda? Okay, then we'll move right along to the Morgan Street wetland proposal. Who's going to start with that? Bruce? Dan?
Yeah, I think I'll start, Joe. Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Evie. I'm the director of the One World Conservation Center, and tonight I'm representing an organization called the Friends of the Morgan Street Wetlands, and that includes One World Conservation Center, the Bennington County Regional Commission, Bennington County Conservation District, and Shelley Stiles is here with us tonight, the Hoosick River Watershed Association. Steve is here representing them, and some citizens as well. And we're here to ask the town to help us conserve a property that is really fairly remarkable. Frankly, I didn't even know this property existed until I got a phone call to be a part of this group, and we started talking about it and taking a walk. The folks that live in this area off Morgan Street and Beach Street are well aware of it. It's a very extensive wetlands, and it's also very interesting because it's where the South Stream and the Jewett Brook form together to form the beginning of the Walloomsac. And it's really a very interesting area because in these wetlands are a variety of trails that already exist. There's a variety of canals through these wetlands that provide a lot of potential recreational opportunity for the community, for residents, but also for visitors. We could envision this property with kayak trails, with marked interpreted trails, and if you see the location of the current Greenberg Reserve at the One World Conservation Center, it's actually possibly connectable to this Morgan Street wetlands. That could be, and it's certainly connectable to the Wide Woods, the Beach Street ball field, some other properties that the town owns, that could be almost the beginnings of a greenway, if you will, around the town of Bennington. But of all these areas, this area of the Morgan Street wetlands is one of the most accessible to people downtown. It's within very easy walking distance. It's also a place where people go running and jogging, where people take pets and walk their pets for exercise. And it's also a really remarkable area of beauty. So we began having these meetings to talk about preserving this land, and we started to involve the Vermont Land Trust. And Don Campbell is here from the Vermont Land Trust this evening. And what we realized was that we can probably get funding to purchase this property from the Greenbergs. The Greenbergs currently own this property. There are possibly a couple of areas on this property where a couple of houses might be able to be erected, but for the most part, this property is really not developable because it is a wetlands. We saw here a recreational opportunity, not only for the citizens of Bennington, but also for, to attract people and to attract more people to our region. We don't know of a place where there are kayaking trails, very many of them, that can go through these kinds of canals and see the various flora and fauna that exist in southwestern Vermont. So it's a very interesting proposition. And I'm going to let Dan tell you just a little bit about the conservation opportunity and what we're asking from all of you. I think you all got this brief before the meeting. So Dan?
I want to thank Shelley Stiles for putting together the information that we gave out to you folks. I think it was very thorough, and so I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of the points that she made and that were in the memo. I think Bruce had mentioned that the Greenbergs have offered this property to the town. It is 140 acres. It has been appraised, and we do have an offer of a price, although I wouldn't want to discuss that in open session, it'd be executive session material. And specifically, the folks that have been meeting to review the prospects for preservation had a couple of goals in mind. One was obviously to preserve the land. The second was to make sure that we could find funding to make this happen without a burden on the taxpayer. And we think we've been able to do that. I'm going to ask Donald Campbell in a little bit to come up and talk about some of the funding ways we could fund this project. But what we're asking for this evening specifically is consensus from you folks to move forward with the plan that we have articulated below, which is essentially to get site control through an option, do some fundraising, develop a management plan for you folks to review and do a memorandum of understanding with the select board, and then finally obtain the property, have the town obtain the property and work with the Friends of the Wetlands to make this into a really important recreation center for the folks in the town and in the region. So we can answer any questions you might have, but I thought probably the biggest question in your mind is probably about how the heck we're going to pay for this. And I thought Donald Campbell, who is the regional director for the Land Trust, Vermont Land Trust, might be able to give you our thoughts on how we thought we might be able to make that happen.
Shake down Bruce and Dan. So good evening. Most of you know I am the regional director for the Vermont Land Trust, and it's really a pleasure to be back in front of you tonight. I'm more of a consultant to this group than I am a part of it, although I'm very much in support of what they're trying to do. The Vermont Land Trust is perhaps best known for farmland conservation, but we also do an awful lot of public access too. So we've worked on the Lake Perrin property and the Doors property up in Arlington, the Fountain Tannery, the Wells Lake St. Catherine property, lots of public access properties, but they all have one thing in common, and that is that communities really want them to happen. So when the Vermont Land Trust gets called in on a community project, it really is only in a situation where the community is very, very clear that it's something that benefits that community. One of the great assets we have in this state is the access to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board up in Montpelier, which is a very orderly and wonderful funding source for affordable housing and for conservation projects that include both farmland conservation and public access opportunities like this one. So the thought was that the Friends group would carry most of the water in terms of trying to raise the money for this, carry all of the water in terms of trying to raise the money for this. And what I'd like to offer is to be a consultant to that group, perhaps work with them to ghostwrite an application on behalf of the town to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board for funds to purchase the property if it's something that the community really wants. And the Friends are also aware of the fact that the funding would really only cover 2/3 of the cost by its nature. It requires a 1/3 match, and so there would have to be a local fundraising component also. And I think the Friends are ready to undertake that too. That could come both as cash from donations and also as bargain sale if the Greenbergs were willing to consider a slightly lower price, or if the appraisal comes in higher. There are a number of different ways we could get at that. So I don't want to put the horse before the cart, but I think the most important thing for me to know is, for the Vermont Housing Conservation Board and the Vermont Land Trust to know, is if this is something that the community thinks is a good idea, and if this is something the community really wants. And honestly, it's a parcel that's very close to downtown. perhaps it's an area you'd rather see housing than recreation, and if that's the case, that's certainly the choice of this board and the other boards that consider it.
So if this thing goes forward, Don, the land goes into the program, it never comes out. It's there for life, right? It cannot be changed in future?
That's right.
Perpetuity stays right there, right?
That's right, very long time. So not something to be toyed with. The Vermont Housing and Conservation Board would grant significant funds, for its purchase, but one of the funding requirements is that a conservation easement would have to go on that land that would keep it available for the purposes it was purchased for, and that would be primarily recreation.
What did the town of Shasberry do in regards to the parent piece? What was their involvement?
Well, I threw that as an example of public access. That was actually through the Fund for North Bennington, which is a little bit of a complicated relationship, but the Fund for North Bennington was actually the recipient of that grant, and they acquired the
From the
property.
Conservation Housing?
That's right,
Okay.
the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. A better parallel might be the Doors property, the Yellow Barn property up in Arlington,
Okay.
and the town really wanted to try to secure that. You may know where the Canfield Barn is, just if you turn off of Route 7, it's just across from the recreation area. And they wanted to make sure that that didn't get developed and was available for both recreation and possibly farmers market and market gardening. And I'm not sure they fully developed all their ideas, but they knew that it was a parcel that they wanted to have in the town inventory for future uses. And so that I helped them write an application to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which was successful, and they eventually acquired it.
Shelley, you got anything you want to add to this? I know you gave us some information. Why don't you come up here so people first of all know who you are? And you've been
She's
involved.
the brains of the operation.
She's not afraid to come in front of us. She's done that before. You're very familiar with this area, as you are all the waters we have here. So what's your feeling about this?
Oh, well, my board and I are 100% behind this project, and in fact, my part in this presentation tonight is to assure you that the Bennington County Conservation District looks forward to spearheading the management planning initiative, and we see that as first we'll officially convene a steering committee, which will consist of the Friends as they are now established, and others that might include the biking community, the hiking community, the floating community, representatives of people of all ages, those who might be interested in the history of the site. It's the old trolley line runs there.
Who will control the beaver out there that always are damming up and over?
Bruce?
Are you going to come to us, or you guys will take it?
They're an attraction.
Yeah. They've been a hazard in the past, flooding. Tom?
How many of the acres are wetlands, actually, out of the 140?
I don't know.
Anybody got a guesstimate?
I would guess at least half of the land, but there is significant upland. This is all pretty much upland. Unfortunately, it was nice pasture land, but it has been taken over by honeysuckle scrub, and that would probably be part of the management plan, is eradicating the invasive honeysuckle species so it'd be more accessible to folks. So probably about 50% of it is wetland, maybe a little bit more if you include the buffers and that sort of thing.
Dan, do you know where the lines may be drawn around that parcel? The entire yellow place is what's being proposed, correct? But do we have a rough idea of where on that map is the low-lying part, and what is the other part that could have?
The low-lying part is essentially in this area here.
Okay.
Yeah. The trolley line is up, adjacent to it, but it's been filled, so it's high, and this land is fairly flat and usable, and then this land up here.
So that would be the part that you had said could potentially be considered to use for housing at some point, is the wider portion there?
That it's conceivable. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't.
I'm just trying to get a feel for what exactly the property, how it breaks down.
I would say there's probably 2 or 3 good house sites on this at best.
But if it goes with Vermont Conservation, you can't.
They would be cut out before that.
Where are the
agreement
access
were made.
points on that?
There's a couple of access points. Belvedere Street, there's access that way. There's an old paper road, town paper road to the north that accesses Morgan Street that folks can travel on. A very good way to get to it is to park at the Beach Street Ball Field and follow the trails into it. Also, the trolley line down here with the Jewett Brook crosses, there's an access point there. The parking is limited on this side, except for maybe a couple spaces at the end of Belvedere, and maybe a couple, there's a kind of a what I call a kayak launch area right near the trolley line as well. But there is significant parking at the ball field. This is where we would see, at least in the beginning, where we would direct folks to access it. And then in the future, perhaps develop some parking to give folks more access to the kayaking resource.
Greg?
This is something I have heard about in previous to this here. And one is the people that are involved that are very qualified to deal with this and very excited about it, which is encouraging. I think if anyone who has hiked the One World Center, if they're out on a nice day for a walk, they want more. You know, you can walk that ground fairly quickly if you're in good health and you know, and it's a nice day. So the idea of creating a greenway right through there where people could continue a hike, I think makes that a very attractive site to something that's already a good start for a greenway. I think it's a great idea. You know, I'd love to see it happen. So that's my
other board members.
No, I think it's a great idea. Do you think we'd be able to get access from the state on this through just the pathway through the state right away to connect the two?
We're pretty confident, yes, because there's not any resource issues there. It's all pretty much highland, upland areas, and we feel pretty confident.
Do you just, the issue of joining, I think, if the southern leg of the bypass goes through, how will you access Bruce from your location to there without a tunnel complex or something
Well,
that's not planned as we speak?
in the town plan, we have language for an underpass.
In the town plan or in the AOT plan for the construction of the southern route?
It's in the town plan.
Okay.
I don't know if it's in the AOT plan, but, you know, we would hope that we would have an underpass, you know, that would allow some access. But even if we didn't, there is some opportunity to perhaps connect. We'd have to cross some roads, but we could stay on the north side of bypass here and put a trail through. You might have to walk a short distance on the road, but there is a way to do it.
Okay, I mean, that's not going to stop me from supporting that. I've been in that area, but one question is going to come up, and it's probably going to come up with the conservation easement again, because of Don, I've heard it come up before. Old timers use that area, some of that area to hunt now, fish now. Is that going to be restricted in that area?
The conservation easement itself wouldn't restrict the hunting and fishing, would not restrict hunting, fishing, and trapping by itself. So that would be up to the town, you know, to make those decisions. In fact, those activities are specifically allowed if the landowner would like to have them happen.
Okay. And I mentioned kind of jokingly the beavers, but we have had beaver problems out there before where it's caused the flooding. Actually, we had to go out there and blow up the dams and those kind of things to get the water running again.
So this is really about the conservation easement. In this case, most of the work would be about providing permanent public access. So honestly, what's the development threat? Not a lot of development threat out there, but probably the biggest threat is that somebody could buy it and could post it, and then nobody could use it.
Yeah.
So I think this is really about keeping it accessible for people. And before we stray entirely from it, there is a little piece of this that the new highway route crosses. And so we would probably do, you were familiar when we did the NETC thing, we'd do the same thing there where we would probably conserve the land, but it would be very clear that if the highway came through, that land would be released for the highway. So this is in no way VLT or VHCB taking a position against the highway. It would just be conserving the land. If the highway doesn't go through, the land's conserved. If it does go through, it would be available to the highway.
Okay.
So, or available for the town to make it available to the highway.
Other board members? Any other citizens out there, part of the Friends, want to come up here and talk about this? Now we get the power up there.
Well, I took
Introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah. I'm Andrea Evie, and I took the walk with a number of the friends and with my husband and so forth out through there. Was it in May, I guess? And it's a beautiful area, and it would be a real shame to have that be lost. I really would like to see the town be able to support something and have this preserved. And it would be a wonderful addition for the Greenberg Reserve property over at NETC as well.
Okay. So I guess I need, go ahead. Come on up to the mic, please.
I have to look at the map.
Introduce yourself, please, for the audience.
I put a canoe in.
Can you introduce yourself to the audience and the record, please?
Pardon?
Can you introduce yourself,
Oh, yeah,
please?
Ron Van Orden. I live on where Morgan and Beach Street come together, or South Stream Road. And I put a canoe in on on Morgan Street, by Briggs. And it's a fantastic area. It's a real treasure. Trouble is, you get in there and there'll be blowdowns and you can't get through. And, it's somebody else's property. I can't go cutting trees up. But, if this went through, it's a real treasure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Dan, I need a timeline, I guess.
Sure.
So here's my question. So, yeah, if you have the select board approval, we'll find that out shortly. Who will be doing the negotiating with the owners of the property? When will that figure become to us? Who will be doing the fundraising for the 1/3 match? And when will that information come to us? And what's the timeline for Don to get everything together up to the Ghost Rider, up to the Housing Conservation Board?
As far as the negotiations, that would be town staff with the Friends, with obviously your ultimate approval as far as whatever that final number is. I can certainly share that number with you folks during executive session. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. As far as the fundraising, that's the Friends. We're committed to doing that. We're committed to doing the fundraising for whatever match is required. And as far as the timeline is concerned, Shelley did a really good job putting things together, and we would be looking for a grant application to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board in February of 2014. Is that correct? That would be our earliest feasible time frame, and given the time that it takes to put these things together, we would hope to have a closing on the property before the end of November of 2014. So, it's a time. It takes some time to make it happen. That's why we want to work with the Greenbergs to get an option and make sure they feel comfortable with us moving forward. We feel pretty confident, given the success of the One World Center land, that they would be willing to work with us to make this a special place for Bennington.
That plus the Old Castle Theater, plus a number of things they've worked with everybody. Joanne, you had your hand up.
Can I ask Dan a question real quick?
Go ahead.
Just quickly. So in order for this to all take place as proposed, the municipality would have to take it over. Is that why it's being presented to us in this fashion? Or?
Well, it does have to be, it has to be is there any requirement on that type of ownership?
Well, it has to be a nonprofit or a municipality, but typically these things are successful, yes, when the municipality wants to have it take it over. And if the municipality doesn't want it enough to take it over, then the Housing and Conservation Board is likely to move on to other projects. So I think that's probably an important point. And just one amplification before Joanne comes up. On the option, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board has given a sort of warm feeling towards the idea of a small feasibility grant to get an option on the property, which would then give us a year to do the fundraising. So they haven't committed to it yet, but they've said if this is something the town really wants, that they would be open to some kind of real money that would hold the Greenbergs.
And I make an assumption the Friends are not a 501c3, so that would take time to become one?
Yeah, or we could work through one of the existing organizations.
Or one of the other organizations, okay.
Yeah. We'd have to consider that.
Joanne?
Thanks. Joanne Ehrenhaus, Director of the Chamber of Commerce here in Bennington. I just wanted to add my support to what's already been said. I can't believe what a wonderful opportunity this is for our community. We don't have to go and buy a water park. This is like the real deal. And it sounds like it can be done expeditiously and fairly economically and efficiently. So I'll put my vote, and I think the members of the chamber would echo that this is something we'd love to see.
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
Dr. Carnes.
Who else? Somebody else?
Just from an economic development standpoint, Joe, I just wanted to mention as well that from some of the research we've done, this addition really ranks among the top in terms of what people are looking for in new home buyers, what new home buyers are looking for, as well as the ability to attract people from outside the area. So obviously from an economic development standpoint, we would be in full support of a project like this.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yep.
Yes, sir. Hi.
Hello, my name's Robin Tarnas, and I'm just a friend. I live in town, and I travel to a lot of other cities. And one of the things that I am always aware of when I go to a new place is just how welcoming it is. And walking through towns, and you'll find when you go to Burlington, where do you go? People always say, let's walk along the lake. When you go to, recently out to Boise, Idaho, just there's trails beside every river. And these are the kind of things that make a town special, make it more than just, an historical accident. It's a planned town. And this is an opportunity where this land is here already. And it's just there for us to be able to conserve it and also make it more available, because most of the people who live in town don't know that this is a recreational and a health benefit to be able to get there and go for a walk and enjoy the Vermont nature. So I recommend it, and I think it's an important thing for the town to do.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to add my name in. I'm Tim Marr from Bennington. Recently, about a month ago, I walked down there and I met a local artist and her husband walking down there, and they love the place, and she's interested in helping in any way possible. And there's always room for artwork, but just that it's a great resource, and it's so, I didn't drive my car to it. I mountain biked over and then walked the bike a little bit, but I think it's a great resource because it connects to, it's close to downtown, and it connects to the Y Woods, which is very underutilized. And I think it could be a spearhead for, more information about where to go around town for trails and things. Maybe there could be, some effort to direct people more about how to travel around the Southern Vermont College campus, which is another beautiful place, but it could be a spearhead. Middlebury has a trail around the whole Middlebury, and it's been a number of years working on it. And up in the Northeast Kingdom, it's a huge economic benefit in the Linden area. Kingdom Trails, they call it, mostly mountain biking and hiking. And everywhere you go now, it seems to be communities are doing this. But what Bennington hasn't done is promote what it has already, so this could be a spearhead to really kind of have some good trail markers and signage. And the Riverwalk is great in Bennington. I mean, that is really starting to, people really appreciate that, so it can kind of go along with that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Dan, what do you need from the board?
Really, all we need this evening is a consensus that you folks think we have a feasible plan here and that you're in support of the project, and we'll start doing the work. That's really all we need this evening, nothing formal.
Why don't we have a motion?
Can we,
Great.
Dan did say he has some stuff today to give us an executive session. Should we get that before we move on this?
The only thing I would discuss is the price.
We're not committed.
We're not committed.
We're just saying we're supporting.
They're just.
I just don't think it hurts to have all the
Starting
information
the
before we move on it.
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying that I don't think it's a bad idea.
Well, I'd make a motion to allow them to pursue the discussion with the Greenberg family over the terms, discussed here.
I'll second it.
In our support. In a second? Okay, any discussion on it?
Yes, I think this is probably the most exciting activity that I've seen since I came on the board. I'm such a junior member. But when I ran, I talked about anchor activity. I didn't realize that it was right here in my own backyard. We don't have to go out of town to find this resource.
It's amazing how people don't know what's in their backyard here in Bennington.
So I support it. I support consensus.
Another discussion.
It's free recreation, first of all, which is a big priority around, and the other thing is it's also a big educational opportunity. A property like this can be utilized by our school system, the University of Vermont, the local colleges, in a science program or.
Yeah, well, Bruce's program out there is getting a lot of educational support. Got a great program out there, and it's great for our kids to participate in these things. So, okay, so I have a motion, second. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's 6-4, 1 absent. Thank you, folks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for all your work.
Dan, are you going to be able to talk to us today in executive session on the price, or are we going to wait till next meeting?
I'll be here.
Okay, good. So we'll add that to our thing. Okay, the next thing is the Ninja Trail presentation, bike path pedestrian grant application proposal. Who's going to talk to us on that one, now that I got it out?
I think it's Mike Harrington.
Mike?
Tell him to turn on the air conditioning and he shut it off.
Mike Harrington still here?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
is.
There he is. Oh, here, Joanne's.
Okay.
Well,
Here she is.
actually, I see a lot of faces who were very instrumental in starting off the work to create the Ninja Bike Path, which is also a pedestrian path.
Excuse me a minute. Can we ask the people in the back, please? Can we ask you to hold your conversation down, please, until, so we continue on with our meeting? Okay, Joanne?
Yeah. Hi, I'm happy to be here tonight. Basically, we're going to present the Select Board with an update on what's been happening in the development of the Ninja Bike and Pedestrian Trail. Behind me are some maps, which we'll go into. But first of all, I'd like to say that, you know, we've wanted a bike trail here in Bennington for 30 years. We're never going to get the Vermont rail system to give us the defunct rail bed. So we decided, let's take what we've got, maximize it, and let's get going on it. Therefore, we called it the Ninja Trail because we're just doing it. And thanks to some wonderful volunteers, I have to say, it's one of the most active committees I've ever been on. So far, we've spent about $212. And it's amazing how far you can get on $200 here in Bennington, especially when people want to get out and get dirty, get full of ticks, use their machetes and their chainsaws. And some of the guys had some larger equipment that everybody envied. But we've gone a pretty far distance already, and we'll show you where we've come, where we'd like to go next, what the ultimate plan is, and then how we would like to improve on it. But the main goal is, as you see in your paper here, but I'd like to share that with the public. We wanted to create a safe and appealing walking, bicycling, running, and cross-country skiing route between Bennington and North Bennington. There are a lot of people between the students in Bennington College, people who live downtown, people who live in adjacent areas. Maybe they don't have cars. Maybe they do. Maybe they just would like to have a healthy lifestyle. Maybe they'd like to ride their bikes. And see, you can ride your bike now behind the Walmart shopping center, and you don't even know you're in town because your view is the river and the country club. It's unbelievable what we have here in Bennington. We've seen a little of it here in the Morgan wetlands, but we have a lot of undiscovered beauty here, and our job is to try to take advantage of it and make it accessible to the greatest number of people that we can, and not to limit it if you can afford or if you have access with vehicles. But if you have 2 legs or a bicycle, you can get out and have a good time. So I guess we should start with where we started working. Would anybody like to come? Oh, no. First, I really need to introduce some of the committee members. I'm going to go alphabetical order. We had Abby Goldsmith, Art Whitman, and his fantastic machine. Bob Block has offered to help. Bruce Learman, who's been instrumental. Charlie Marsden and his earth movers, incredible. Christine Bongartz from the Department of Health. She also took one of the nicest pictures I've ever seen in the wintertime from the bike path across the river. Christine Evius, who's been very active in the Rails to Trails movement. Dan Monks, who gave me my first encouraging words. Janet Cunningham and her partner Peter. Jim Henderson, who makes phenomenal maps. We also have Jonas Spivak, Kim Turner, Linda and Ed Rates, Mark Anders, who has a lot of experience in bike paths, and believe me, we've made him use all that experience here. Melissa and John Rowe, Michael Harrington, Robert Ebert and Melissa Hepler, Sharon Sawsville, and even Tom Jacobs. You've expressed an interest in our bike path, and I hope you're going to use it.
For sure.
You'll be the test model.
There you go. Robert.
These are just some of the people who've really put their time where their mouths are. They've come out and dressed in, bug protection clothing, walked with GPS pieces, done the hard labor. And really all I did was make a few phone calls and say to the developers who own all these properties, do you think we could build a bike path behind your building? Nobody said no. Everybody said, are you kidding? We've been waiting for this to happen. So it's been a real encouraging process, and makes me proud of the community as well as the volunteers. So, can I have some help on the phases up here? Yeah, Mark knows these phases better than anybody. Would you like to?
Hi, my name is Mark Anders, and I'm the transportation planner for the Bennington County Regional Commission. And these are basically just the maps that I think you got in your memos. So it's a project, as Joanne said, that will allow people to walk and bike basically between North Bennington and Bennington. And avoiding Northside Drive 67A, which is not the most comfortable safe environment for biking and walking. So the final product will be a 8-foot wide gravel path that's hard packed, that is good not only for mountain bikes but for sort of more thin-tired bikes. That's the goal. And it's a pretty big project. Its final project is 1.9 miles. So we thought it would be a good idea to break it into manageable phases. So the first phase, phase 1, is what we can build now. It starts at Kings Ave on the other side of the, a little bit down the street from the pedestrian bridge, and goes behind Walmart, and connects and goes behind the suburban propane facility, and then behind all the industrial properties on Morse Road, and then goes between the salt storage business and Funds Brook. And for this, we don't need any right-of-way. Joanne has already worked out agreements with the property owners. We don't need any permits. So this is something we could kind of knock out now. And in fact, we haven't done a significant amount of work. So this will create a loop trail. You could take the path that is described and then come back on Morse Road. And that would be a nice recreation loop. And it would also make it easier when you're biking between Bennington and North Bennington, provide a partial route. And the second phase, unfortunately, we do have to cross Ferns Brook, which is a significant but not insurmountable obstacle. We need to do more engineering work and design work for that, and we're hoping to, we will apply for scoping study for that. So phase 2 would be we would cross the stream and then go across the state right-of-way that buffers Vermont 279. There's actually a perfect spot to go under the roadway. I've already talked to agency transportation. They come down and take a look at it, and I don't think they have a problem with that.
Whoa, time out.
Yeah.
Talk about spot. You told me there's a crossing there now, or they're going to have to build a crossing underneath the highway?
There's the facility, the overpass was actually designed with a future path in mind.
Okay.
So there's clearance.
All right.
And the agency right-of-way section came down, and I walked them through it, and they support the project. We've actually already submitted a Section 111 permit application for that. So that's phase 2, and then also behind, we would sort of throw a rough path behind Hanover Plaza to Route 67A. And then phase 3, we would tackle one of the other tricky spots, which is between the western entrance to Hanover Plaza and the entrance to Bennington College. We'd have to go along state right-of-way again along Route 67A. And it's pretty tight there in a couple sections, so that's something we'd also like to address in the scoping study, which we will apply for. And then phase 4 will be just the complete path. And I should say there's a difference between the red and the green lines. The red lines are the absolutely critical parts that you would need if you were trying to bike between Bennington and North Bennington, so those are sort of our high priorities. And we intend to build those to a high cycling standard, hard packed gravel. And the green parts are the parts that are a little bit less of a priority, and we could build maybe to a lower standard if we had trouble raising funds, for example. But the final goal is to make the entire path this high standard.
Okay, we keep talking to Bennington and North Bennington. Bennington College has already completed their path from the entrance to the campus.
Yes, they do have a path.
So is there going to be a connection from the campus to North Bennington, because the gates are closed there now?
Actually, there's a space in the wall that you can ride through that people use now to get to the.
Legally?
North Bennington.
Yeah,
Sorry?
you can.
Yeah.
Legally?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
close
you can
to-
legally. you
But
can legally-
dangerously,
I know
if the cars
this,
are too
but
wide.
unfortunately, on a lot
should
of
get
people's
off and walk
garments,
through
it says that the road is open, and a lot of tractor trailers barrel straight towards that wall before
Yeah.
they notice that it's only for bikes and pedestrians.
Okay.
And I've seen some very alarming situations. That wall, but you can't get through on a bike. And so, I guess we are asking the board for two things. We would like to apply for a bike ped grant. The State Agency of Transportation has these bike ped grants. There's $4 million available this year, and a scoping study is eligible for it. We would like to do a scoping study from the covers the area where the stream crossing is all the way to the Bennington College entrance, because that's really where the tricky issues are. And also, so we would apply for a $35,000 grant. That's typical for a scoping study like this. There's a 10% match, local match, so it's a $3,500 donation from the municipal funds.
Can it be in kind?
I don't think it can be.
It has to be in cash.
Cash, yes.
Before we get to that point, let me go back to this route here. You said something, I just want to make sure I heard it correctly. Let's take it from Hicks Avenue to the bridge past the Creams Crossing there on 67.
Okay.
You've got the section owned by Walmart. There was a condition permitting a Walmart that land would be used for a path. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was the conditions the same conditions on Hannaford Plaza on that piece? So those two are good. Now, what about the green area between those two? We do have written right away from the property owners?
The people who own the Walmart own that whole shopping center and with Price Chopper, that whole area.
Right, Mr. Levy?
And so that area that we pulled a little bit through the woods is actually part of that whole complex. And I spoke to the owners of the entire complex. I didn't talk to Walmart or Price Chopper. I talked to the people that own the whole entire thing.
Who owns the land around the Morris Industrial Complex?
Oh, those are individual landowners?
That's the ones I'm worried about.
I already spoke to every single person, Doxy Roofing, Suburban Propane, all the different owners of those properties. We're going behind their fence, but on their property before the tree line, and every one of them said that they support the project.
Support the project, but in writing, so that if we're going for money for a grant, we know we've got this, so we know what we're talking about.
And I don't want to diminish these folks volunteering their land for this, but those properties also have permit conditions on them.
They do?
Yes.
Okay,
So that, but they were very generous in allowing us to.
got it,
put in
okay.
their location, so.
So we can go on. So you're asking us now for the permission to go forward with the grant?
Yes.
So Mike, where are we gonna get $3,500?
That's why we're
We didn't
coming
budget,
before
we
you.
didn't budget for it.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. My question to you is, would the town act as the fiscal agent so we can do our fundraising? That would help to pay for some of these, part payments on grants and so forth, because you're the nonprofit.
Right. Stuart?
We can certainly do that.
Thank you.
We've done it before.
Thank you very much. My night's complete, okay.
And you may be able to speak more to this, Mark, but from the town perspective and the grant application perspective, the application would go in, I think it's the end of July, it's due, and then it would probably be, the scoping study would probably occur over the winter and in through the spring. There may be some, if we're talking $3,500, and I haven't talked with Stuart about this yet, but I know there are some grant money set aside for other additional projects, so there may be an opportunity there for us to look at that for the future budget season as well. And I don't know the way we typically do that. I'm only speaking based on current knowledge, so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Stu.
Well, we do have about $100,000 in reserve for the bike pedestrian pathway project.
Right.
I think that because that project is slowed, although it's starting to pick up steam again, that there might be an opportunity to use some of those funds, which would come out of reserve and would
We
not
have those at our
impact.
discretion. We can,
Well, they're set aside for a bicycle pedestrian pathway
this
system.
would probably have to meet it, even though it's not what it was originally designed for. I mean, it's.
Well, it's not the pathway
Right.
plan that we originally started out with, but it certainly
Becoming.
would qualify.
Certainly.
But it's been in our town plan for years to do this. Maybe not exact, well, yeah, it has, just about, as I remember, almost exactly where you got these lines drawn here.
And for tonight's conversation, essentially what we're looking for is just an affirmation from the board that you're okay with us applying for the actual grant.
When will we need to allocate the funds? By what date?
It would, usually the way it happens is the billing would occur whether we went through BCRC as the agency for doing the scoping study or another agency. So as we receive invoices from that agency, they'll reimburse 90% of those.
And what are you shooting for a completion date on this entire project? I might be asking you the wrong question. Maybe I should have directed that to.
Well, I think the entire project, and Joanne can certainly speak a little bit more in depth, but that would certainly be based on, once we do the scoping study, whether that opened doors for future grant monies. The biggest thing for us was, and it's mentioned in the memo, but there's a bridge crossing that we want to look at, and obviously the state right-of-way there, as well as the traffic control around the corner across from Carbone, that area. So there are some pretty tricky pieces to maneuver here that this scoping study would help us at least draw a conclusion on. From there,
And then go for more funding from there on?
Essentially, from there, we could look towards fundraising as well as future bike pedestrian grants, which there is no max on. So we can certainly apply for a certain, whatever we think is possible to do the actual project. But most projects that I'm seeing based from the state perspective, most construction projects aren't usually being funded in part or in whole until a scoping study.
And this scoping study will give us a better idea of what that final cost project is going to look like.
Right. Essentially, it would give us the idea of the different phases, costs associated, materials needed, and so on.
I mean, I think there's, it's needed. It's something that's people are going to use.
Well, it's something we've been talking about for years and years and
Absolutely.
years. It's not a new thing.
Right, there's a lot of support for it. People have given their time, as well as property owners have given their land.
Right.
And we have money in reserve for something at least very closely which mirrors this project. I'd be willing to put forth needed money out of that reserve pot to bring this closer to fruition. So.
Other board members?
Yeah, so would I. I mean, as long as the railroad's never going to give it up. So.
Well, we're not quitting on that yet.
That's not even that.
Give up on that.
But it's still.
That's a whole other.
That's the return trip to Bennington,
Yeah, don't
right?
give up on
This
that.
still goes towards the end of what they're trying to accomplish on the other.
We've been talking about the railroad.
I almost hit that underpass again here a few days ago, so we're not finished with that one
Well,
yet.
it's true. I mean, we've been talking about that for 30 years. And in the last year, these guys have made so much headway on this thing. Joanne keeps coming for more trail signs. Like, what are you guys doing out there? And so it's really great to see, if we can support, if we have funds that are already designated for that type of thing, I think it makes sense to try and push the one that's actually moving.
It certainly does.
Sounds good. It sounds like you, go ahead.
Just have a couple things. I want to, I know that Mike was talking about perhaps applying for grant funds in the future for construction. I would like to say that the folks that are working on this trail are really committed to trying to do this without construction grant funds, because it usually takes 5, 6, 7 years to get those. The only reason we want to do the scoping study is we can happen quickly, and we can know exactly what we need to do, and then we can really hit this community, ask them to help us to make this happen, and they've been very receptive. So I want to keep the momentum going. I don't want folks to think, oh, geez, they're just going to apply for a grant and it's going to be 10 years from now.
No.
That's not our goal. We want to make this happen as quickly as possible, which is why we have phases here. And in connection with that, I did want to have one more ask for you folks. In addition to being the agent for receiving funds and perhaps applying for this grant, we would like the your blessing to allow for our highway crew under RJ's direction to construct portions of this path as they have time. Our commitment is to raise the funds for the materials, and then as our highway crew has time, if they can install the materials when they have some downtimes, we would certainly appreciate that effort, and we would work with that support, and we would work with RJ to make sure that that was something that didn't negatively affect their other duties. So that's the third thing we'd like to ask for this evening.
That's the thing I do want to see a plan for.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And that's what we would, the plan that we have right now would be phase one, where we install these two sections to a high standard, and then these would be, we already have MSK Engineering has already designed this entire pathway for us. We have very specific standards. We've already talked to RJ about materials and what equipment would be needed.
Right.
And we'd be happy to share that with you before any authorization, but we feel very confident that's something they can do, blindfolded.
Well, I think once you see the scoping project done, we'll have a better feel for what's going to be done by volunteers, what's going to be done, what are you asking for the town to participate in, and where else we have to go.
Just to clarify, the scoping project really is from here up, and this is really the part we want to continue construction on this fall. So we don't think we need any scoping because we have it designed. We already have an engineer's design.
How's the other board feel? I'd like to see a plan, though, for the scope of work they want the town.
For that piece, I would agree with you.
We'd be happy to do that. We just want to make sure that that's something that you guys, we feel pretty comfortable asking for, given that it was included in the 90-day agenda, and we feel confident that we can put together a good plan that the highway folks can pick away at.
Board feel okay with that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable because you're basically taking something that's been on the back burner for 10 years and with volunteer help getting it to the front burner. And I think what I'm hearing is the volunteers are going to keep going, keeping it in the front burner. So we're not really putting much at risk at all right now.
Absolutely.
So other than kudos to you folks, Joanna.
Thanks, folks. Everybody's been coming forward on that trail. And thanks for all the folks that moved it this far along.
Really, Mark, great job.
Okay, borrowing approval. Stuart.
Yes, we have two approvals we're seeking tonight. Both are historic in nature. The first is the water system improvements borrowing. This has been made necessary because the final phase of the water filtration plant upgrade, the paperwork and documentation for that had been submitted prior to Tropical Storm Irene. It was under review at the state level when Irene hit Waterbury, and unfortunately, most of the documentation and paperwork went down the river, whichever river it was, yes. So it has necessitated a restart and a redocumentation. It has taken us all this time to get through the process, and in fact, the state in their due diligence has actually increased the amount of eligibility a few thousands of dollars. So we're looking now to, the money has essentially been spent. This would be money that would finalize the grant. We would borrow $201,979.50. It would essentially become to us to reimburse us for monies already expended. It would become part of the $7 million bond that we are already paying down, and the documentation shows you what the annual payment would be. This would be budgeted on an annual basis and simply become part of the necessary payments to the bank for the borrowing for that particular project. The second is the rolling over, essentially, of the recreation center note. You'll recall when we did the voter-approved improvements at the recreation center to stabilize the wall around the pool and point it up and do some additional roof repair and strengthening. The voters originally approved, I think it was $650,000. The outstanding balance, we actually spent much less than that, but the outstanding balance needs to be rolled over and, if possible, will be paid down as quickly as possible during the next 8 years. If that is done, then there is no need to look at this as a bonded indebtedness. It simply continues to be a line of credit that we are paying down on an annual basis.
On a little over $500,000.
A little over $500,000. Both require board approval of the bond anticipation notes. Documents require board signatures on all the documents. The treasurer would essentially sign these documents at the office tomorrow or the day following, and they would then be submitted as necessary. I have the originals for the water system improvements, and I have indicated where the pages are that the board needs to sign. And should you make a motion to waive the reading of the documents and approve the borrowing, I would circulate those for your signatures.
Okay. Before the motion of waiving
I'll make a
reading.
motion.
Well, wait,
Before-
first of all, any
okay,
discussion on what Stuart just brought up, either on the water system improvement or the recreation center bond? Any discussion at all? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading of both.
I'll make a motion to waive the reading of the documents.
Second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor? That's 6-4, okay. Now we need a motion to adopt.
Approve the borrowing.
Approve.
You do those individually?
It would be best if it was done individually,
Okay, let's
since
go
there's
with the
two
water
separate
system
projects.
improvements.
I'll make a motion to approve the water system improvements borrowing.
Okay, we have a second, any discussion on that one? All in favor? That's 6-4, one absent. Okay, the recreation center bond anticipation note?
I'll make a motion to approve the recreation center bond anticipation note as well.
I'll second
And a
that.
second, any discussion on that one?
Just a quick, it's going to be paid down as quickly as possible over the next years. How is that budgeted?
What we're attempting to do, and part of it may be, some additional monies may be paid once we finish the review of fiscal year 13. We would look to spend or pay down with monies that are unexpended at the end of a given fiscal year, as well as pay the interest, which we'll budget for. So if there are funds left over at year end in the general fund, we would look to you to approve the expenditure. We would then pay down whatever funds are deemed appropriate by this board, and then pay the appropriate interest at the same time.
Because this has already been approved by the voters.
It's been approved by the voters. What we're attempting to do is, we have 10 years in which to go to the bond bank for a formal bond approval. If we can pay it off before that time, there's no need to do that.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Stuart, you can go ahead and.
I'll circulate both documents. One has the pages marked for signature, the other does not, and there are 3 pages that will be looking for signatures on the second document as well, so.
And the manager's report.
Manager's report. I only have one action item for you this evening, and this is a request from the Alzheimer's Association to waive the fee for the annual Walk to End Alzheimer's use of the Willow Park Pavilion. This is scheduled for September 8th, and normally the fee would be $60. The policy provides that the board may waive that request for nonprofits should it decide to do so. And obviously, if they don't have to spend $60 paying for a rental, it's $60 that can go towards their fundraising efforts. And I would need a motion by the board to waive that fee.
Board members?
I couldn't support it any more heartily. It's what took my mother.
So you can make a motion?
I'll make a motion to waive the fee.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? That's 6-4, the motion's waived. Passed, and the request, the fee is waived.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other items for you this evening.
Okay. Tom?
Just keep renewing my thoughts about digital paperwork in lieu thereof.
You stole my thunder tonight.
You know, it's,
I was on my
even if it's just scanned and emailed to us rather than, if we have, I'd love to have iPads for everyone, but
yeah,
I think you might have capability there, but I'm not sure.
We have the ability to scan and send in PDF, and I'll talk to my staff about that and try to get that out. Just if board members should just let us know who wants it that way, and we'll try to accommodate you.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing on that is, last week I left town on Thursday, and I wasn't able to get, it came out late Wednesday, I wasn't able to get it, I wound up, making arrangements and scrambling around. It's digital, I can get it anywhere, so.
Has anybody looked into like the Dropbox application that works for it? Because that's, I know you folks reached out to CDC
We talked with-
administration. When I
yes.
started on that board, that's the way we ultimately started going, and it's a very efficient system.
We haven't, but we did talk with the CDC, and
I mean,
I just installed that on my iPad.
right.
Yeah, I've transferred stuff for the economic development, some of the packets and stuff, and it does work great. Thanks to Mr. Harrington's help.
It becomes nearly impossible to retroactively go back to try and find something. And I just have almost no way to file it, in a manner which I can actually follow my own system that I've somewhat tried to create it.
I'm close to applying for a burn permit.
Right, I have a pile of stuff that I think I might need again at some point in time, but no way to sort through it really. So if it was digital, and things were separated by individual meeting, we could go back with just a general idea and find things, because there's times when I want to go back and look at, things that we've done in the past, and we can't do it.
Okay, anything else, Greg?
Yeah, one thing, just out of our newspaper, Katarina Hilbert from the Bennington Southwestern Vermont Career Center won an award at National Skills USA Championships out in Kansas City for T-shirt design, and I just wanted to point that out and shout out to the CDC and to the young lady who won that. It's part of the career readiness programs that we all talk about all the time. And so when you get national honors and not on the sports page, I like to bring those up.
Great.
Especially graphic arts.
People, yeah. I'm a little sensitive to the graphic arts, yes. So congratulations to everybody involved with that.
Justin?
No, that was
it?
Tom was on it. So.
Okay, Jim?
I'm good this week.
Sharon?
No, I just want to thank the person that smashed my window behind the town office parking lot this afternoon.
In your car?
They know who they are. Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, fireworks went off well, no incidents on the 4th that I know about?
Actually, I should say publicly that the activities of the police personnel who were on site, as well as the Bennington Rural Fire Department folks who were on site, it was handled very professionally, very safe. Kudos to all.
And they were beautiful fireworks.
They actually were very nice.
But I heard you had to put them lower than you had in the past, so I couldn't see them from my deck.
Well, I'm sorry. We're going to have to cut some trees, Joe, to get...
No, I've heard great things about the fireworks, and I want to thank all the sponsors who came forward to help us. Obviously the town puts money in there because it's an important event for the town, but the sponsors. Mary, you're looking at me. You need to say something, kiddo? Come on up. I'll recognize Mary Morrissey as part of mine.
Mary Morrissey. I didn't expect to be here this evening, but I was truly disheartened when I heard the report that came in from the Homeless Coalition. I had heard rumblings of it possibly a couple of days ago, but we certainly as a legislative body, hearing a 75% decrease is absolutely ludicrous to us. I would recommend to this board and to the coalition, and I will certainly be in touch with Dick and Alice, who sit on appropriations, because we were never notified of this type of cut. I years ago was on the coalition, the board for the Homeless Coalition, and I understand the need, and we hear it statewide. The issues in dealing with homeless, and for this to happen and in kind of a 2-week span with no transition or an impact of resources and monies that will come back to the community, I think is just wrong. So I will certainly be making some calls to see what we can do, but I was a little bit concerned, and again, we have a great community that always steps up to the plate to provide resources, but there are some further safety and liability issues for you folks as well that I'm not sure if we can't look to somehow cut this at the kneecaps in order to fix it statewide, or have some of those resources while some kind of transition possibility plan is put in place. So I'll do, certainly do my part and talk with my colleagues to see what we can do, but I'm very disheartened because it will have, that $30 per night is going to probably snowball into 10 times that amount per day, and so it makes no sense at all, no sense at all.
Mary, I appreciate what you're going to do,
But I think there
have a-
needs to be a strong message from this board and
Right.
from everyone that is listening to this, that this is not acceptable in our communities.
I have a pit in my stomach, having served up there, knowing that no one goes over a budget more thoroughly than you do. And if you didn't catch it, it got snuck in there somehow. And I don't know where it did. I'd be interested to see where that got snuck in.
You could see possibly in some of the budgets that were had a 5 to 10 possible %, but a 75, and basically pulling the rug out with no transition plan is just not acceptable. So,
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a need to go in executive session for legal.
Motion.
And for real estate, Joe?
In what? In
Real estate?
Still in real estate.
Okay, a motion to go in executive session. Do I have a second for legal and real estate? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, let's take about 5 minutes.
PD's supposed to be handling the control.
They are, yes.
Because